Hello everyone, I am Max from Crypto Potato. Today I am joined by Jimmy Song, Bitcoin developer and entrepreneur. Welcome. Really excited for our interview. Let's start with the first question. First of all, congratulations on Blockchain Capital. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about that, its roots, everything?
Yeah, sure. I'm a venture partner at Blockchain Capital. I'm there to sort of be a bridge to the core community and sort of help develop the infrastructure. We don't know exactly what that'll look like yet, but we're going to work together to find out. We're going to do a lot of listening to sort of the people in the space that are working on a lot of this stuff, and come up with good ideas and implement them, and hopefully make Bitcoin even better.
When were you first exposed to Bitcoin?
So 2011, I was reading this sort of geeky website called /dot.org. It's sort of like their tagline is news for nerds, important stuff. And I saw a story around January of 2011 that said Bitcoin has broken $1. And I was like, wow, what is this Bitcoin thing? And sort of having it gone through 2008, with the financial crisis and everything, I think I was pretty primed to sort of look at the banking sector a little more skeptically. So when I read about it and I saw it and I heard about how it worked, I was just kind of blown away. I tried to get money into it, but it was pretty complicated at the time. You couldn't buy with PayPal. You had to transfer to Dwolla and then to my Gox and then buy off Mt. Gox and then get it off. So I didn't bother. It's one of the biggest regrets in my life. But yeah, that was what happened.
What were some exciting aspects that brought you to the crypto world?
The most exciting aspect was the fact that there was a 21 million coin limit. So when I first heard that, I think I have the same reaction that a lot of people have, which is that, oh my gosh, there's only 21 million. I better get some before everyone else, right? Like I need to get something in there. And so, that was definitely one of the most interesting. I didn't really discover the rest of the exciting parts of Bitcoin until a couple years later when I started actually developing. And that was, the personal security aspect. Like it's a bearer instrument. You can just keep it and you can hold it. And up until then, I actually had all my coins on Mt. Gox. So wow. It was very fortuitous that I came upon that. I'm still thankful to a friend of mine for telling me something's fishy with Mt. Gox. Go get your own wallet, and I removed my coins from there, and that was really good. But yeah, that was obviously the 21 million limit, the technology behind it, the fact that it's decentralized, that there's no single point of failure, no central government. I think between those 2 years, I had read a lot more on Austrian economics and libertarian thinking. So I was a lot more primed for that, and certainly that's become a larger part of my belief system today. And it's exciting because it's, to me, a way to become self-sovereign, and that's an important aspect of, I think, what we need to do to make civilization work better.
What was your involvement in Bitcoin Core?
Yeah, so my contribution to Bitcoin Core in particular actually didn't start till last year, and it was just sort of playing around with some stuff, and I started writing some functional tests within Python to test some RPC calls that hadn't been done yet, and it was mostly just to learn how to do it. and I did some of that. I refactored a few of the tests. I reviewed a bunch of code that John Newberry had written, and I think he had the most commits for the 0.15 release because he's really into it now. But he, interestingly, didn't get into Bitcoin until like a couple years ago. So he's a relatively new developer, but he's obviously doing a lot of contributions. But yeah, a lot of testing stuff. I'm not quite bold enough to go into more of the main stuff. I do have BIP 176, utilizing bits instead of bitcoins. So there's 1 million bits in a Bitcoin, and sort of removing unit bias for people, and also allowing people to not make less mathematical errors on orders of magnitude. That's That's mine as well. But yeah, most of my involvement before that came in open source projects like PiCoin and BTCD and Color Coins and things like that. And Armory, of course. I worked there for a while, so yeah.
How much does Bitcoin Core's development affect Bitcoin?
So Bitcoin Core certainly has some influence over Bitcoin's development. But influence is really interesting because in a sense, anyone can hard fork at any time. Anyone can soft fork at any time. And you can just sort of do whatever you want. It's a decentralized system. So influence in the sense that you can make everybody do something, kind of like an authoritarian government. Nobody can really do that. You can't make anybody do anything. You can't force people to upgrade. You can't force them to follow the fork that you want. You can't force miners to mine your blocks. So it's really a voluntary system. That said, like influence in the sense of getting the community to follow, I would say they have a tremendous amount of influence, and that's well earned. It's a meritocracy. It's something that they deserve because they have sort of been good stewards of the Bitcoin code already. So in that sense, I'd say they have a lot of influence, but it doesn't have to last forever. If Bitcoin Core decided to lift the 21 million limit, for example, I think there would be a lot of people that would go with another implementation or refuse that hard fork. It's interesting because Bitcoin really is a meritocracy, and you're only as good as what the community thinks of you at the moment. So it really is a social experiment in that regard.
Yeah. In many ways, I see Bitcoin Core almost like the gatekeepers,
Mm-hmm.
and that because it's decentralized, there's no central focus, there's no government,
Mm-hmm.
but there are still people who keep everything somewhat in order, or at least try to.
Yeah, it's sort of like this amorphous beast, and anyone can propose anything at any time, and you have to like back it up with justifications and code, and you need to convince people. And obviously, some people are better than others, and there are sort of a lot of them are very esoteric technical questions that are very hard to decide on or to learn. But it's kind of cool that you could come in and be a huge influencer after sort of earning your stripes.
Yeah. How does Bitcoin's blockchain differ from other blockchains?
Well, the technical aspect isn't all that different from, say, Litecoin or something like that, because they copied most of Bitcoin's code. So it's you tweak a few of the parameters, and it's like, okay, well, we have the same blockchain. The real difference in my mind is the decentralized nature, right? A lot of altcoins have a single point of failure, and it's usually just the creator. The creator gets to decide where that project's going to go and what they're going to do, and how they're going to be. Classic example is Ethereum, right? Like Vitalik Buterin gets to decide. If he wants to bail out the DAO, he gets to bail out the DAO. If he wants to go to proof of stake, they get to go to proof of stake. And I don't begrudge them that, but part of what makes Bitcoin special is that Satoshi Nakamoto left. It's a very underrated gift to the Bitcoin community that he left, and sort of left it decentralized, and that's been all sorts of good for the entire ecosystem.
There's currently a lot of talk about private and centralized blockchains. What do you think is the future of these blockchains, and how will they be used?
So I think the minute you centralize a blockchain, it's not really anything other than a database with maybe permission ledgers or something like that. I don't find that terribly interesting, and I'm not sure where the innovation is other than maybe the permission part, but you can already do that with a lot of systems. The only interesting thing comes when you can sort of distribute that database and like not give anyone the privilege of being the central one. That's when it becomes interesting. But that's not easy, right? Like making that with people talk about stuff like, oh, we can, put healthcare data on the blockchain, and then like any doctor can go look it up. This is not an easy thing to set up. I mean, we're talking about 250 byte transactions in Bitcoin, and that's hard enough to sync. You're talking about like 2 gigabyte MRIs on the blockchain, and you're going to encrypt that. and have it accessible to everybody. I don't think a lot of people know what they're talking about or know what they're getting into when they're talking about blockchain. It happens to be a buzzword a lot of people like. But we'll see. I'm sure there are applications. It's just people don't really understand it yet, so they think it can do anything. It kind of reminds me of the early days of the internet. Oh, the internet will let me fly or something. People just don't know, and it takes time. And once they do, it'll then the real innovation can happen.
What are your feelings about the Bitcoin forks that recently happened back in August?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of Bitcoin forks, but the biggest one was the first one. That's the Bitcoin Cash hard fork. And that proved to me, I think, that Bitcoin's anti-fragility. I think a lot of developers, including myself before that, were sort of living in fear of the hard fork, sort of thinking that it would dilute the brand, that nobody would use it, that it would absolutely crush Bitcoin. The opposite seems to have happened. More or less, it proved that Bitcoin's anti-fragile. Like whenever there's a disordering event, things get better, not worse. And in particular with Bitcoin Cash, we saw sort of the entire ecosystem having to react to the hard fork itself, right? Like there were a lot of exchanges that were down for a while. They had to, figure out how to do replay protection and split their coins and have their databases upgraded, the entire ecosystem upgraded. And for me, that was a big value add. In a way, I think we have to thank Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold for making Bitcoin stronger, because their disordering events sort of forced everybody to upgrade and make their software better. Yeah, I mean, I think the price is pretty indicative of what happened. Bitcoin was 2,700 before. The combination of Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold and all those other ones, like by the end of the year, was like 20,000 or something like that. So I see that as a really good thing, and I actually kind of hope for more hard forks as a way to sort of steel ourselves against different types of attacks that can happen on the network.
Speaking of Bitcoin Cash, do you feel that it's a worthy competitor to Bitcoin? And if not, or if you do, what may other competitors be? For example, Litecoin, is that a competitor to Bitcoin?
I don't see Bitcoin Cash as a competitor necessarily, nor do I consider most altcoins competitors, in the sense that none of them are decentralized. They all have a single development team and somebody that just sort of more or less calls the shots. Bitcoin Cash in particular has one developer that seems to be calling all the shots on that network. Amaury Sachet, he did a hard fork of Bitcoin Cash already. He's planning different hard forks like every 6 months or something like that. If you can hard fork, that sort of shows that you are centralized, because you're forcing everyone to upgrade. Now, I mean, are they competitors in terms of like mind share and things like that? Of course, of course. There are people that are thinking about, investing in Bitcoin that end up buying Litecoin because it's cheaper or something like that. And that's sort of kind of stupid in my mind. But we can't protect people from their own stupidity. That's just, I think that way lies madness. Just sort of show Bitcoin's value proposition, and I think. Centralization will ultimately be the downfall of a lot of these other coins. But who knows? I could be wrong. It's possible that something else comes along and is an order of magnitude better than Bitcoin. Maybe there's some innovation that we haven't thought of at all that comes in and becomes the killer app. But at least at this point, my feeling is that none of these seem to be be orders of magnitude better. So I stick with Bitcoin.
Do you think that altcoins have some sort of purpose? Do you think that there is a need for altcoins?
Certainly so altcoins definitely have some innovation behind them. So Monero, for example, has utilizes confidential transactions and range proofs to sort of hide who you're sending to and how much you're sending to them. So that much is pretty interesting, in the sense that altcoins can be like an innovation lab for Bitcoin, and you can try out things where people actually are risking money. But as far as usefulness to Bitcoin. Other than that, I don't really see it. It might be useful for some other purpose if they find another niche or something like that. But I mean, until those are proven, I don't really see them as anything special.
What do you think about ZK Snarks technology, and will we see it on Bitcoin's network in the future?
So I'm a fan of zero-knowledge proofs in general, and ZK Snarks technology in particular is very, very interesting. I'm not so certain that it's that viable, at least right now, just because of the CPU cycles it takes up to do the actual signing. It's like 30 to 60 seconds, something like that. In the same way that I'm a little bit hesitant about Monero's confidential transactions, because their UTXO set just continues to grow, and it's sort of infinitely expanding. My best privacy one that I think might make it into Bitcoin is Mimblewimble as a sidechain. That has a lot of the privacy aspects of ZK Snarks and Monero, but just in a different way. So, obviously I don't know the future, but they're all interesting technologies, and I hope to see more privacy in Bitcoin transactions going forward.
Are we close to reaching a state where we'll have accessibility to Lightning technology?
Yeah, I mean, smart contract. So a lot of people think smart contracts are the unique domain of Ethereum, and it's not. Bitcoin has its own smart contract language. It's called Script. And the funny thing is, Ethereum's like major innovation is ICOs, right?
Yeah.
But it's not actually an innovation. It's something that you could do in Bitcoin back in 2013 with color coins. It's just, there wasn't a market for it, and Vitalik and the Ethereum team, God bless them, they've done great with their marketing. But they made ICOs a much bigger thing on Ethereum because, the big difference between Solidity and Script is that Solidity is Turing complete. But nobody actually wants to use the Turing completeness. It's because it's like way more dangerous, and there's a larger attack surface and things like that, and you could see it with the DAO, right? Like they had Turing complete contracts, and somebody exploited it and drained it of all its money, and they ended up needing to do a bailout. But yeah, I mean, as far as smart contracts are concerned, I think simplicity is something that Bitcoin is looking into, and that may be where we're going. I don't see like Ethereum having like sole domain over smart contracts at all, and even like something like Rootstock, they're trying to do it as a Bitcoin sidechain. I don't know if there's necessarily that big of a market for like Turing complete smart contracts, but as it stands, it's already kind of there, and people make it out to be Ethereum's the smart contract platform. Well, it's not if you're just using it for the basic stuff that Bitcoin can already do. So I don't know. I don't get the big deal.
Do you think that there is room for the altcoins, or do you think that Bitcoin is more than enough?
I don't know. So there's always innovation that you can't see, right? Like futurists are notoriously bad at predicting the future, right? Like you ask 100 years ago, like what people thought the future was, and they thought like people would fly or something. And nobody thought of the cell phone, which is like ubiquitous today. So it's really hard to tell. Maybe there's some coin that figures out a formula that works for them. I don't know. But yeah, my suspicion is that Bitcoin is going to be the top end of the Pareto distribution. So 80% of the value will be in Bitcoin, and everything else will have 20%, and we'll be fighting very hard for it. The thing about altcoins is that they're really hard to kill. Like it's not like a company where you have payroll and things like that, where companies will go bankrupt because they run out of money. Altcoins can more or less subsist on a single miner mining. And even if that miner stops mining, you can sort of like raise them back from the dead by mining some more. So a lot of coins like live this zombie-like existence where you kill them and then they come back to life and whatever. So yeah, is there room in the ecosystem for them? I guess. Are they going to really add anything? I don't know. I have some doubts, but it's I'm I'm not so arrogant as to think that I know all possible altcoins that can possibly exist.
The million-dollar question. Are we in a crypto bubble?
So I think we are in a bubble in the sense that, like short term, it's probably going up and down, probably more than you'd expect. But that's to be expected. It's a volatile asset. A lot of people don't know what it is. A lot of people are coming in. It's not really a unit of account yet. But like I say to a lot of newbies that are asking me, hey, should I invest in Bitcoin? My answer is always, well, if you're gonna keep it long term, like 5-10 years, then it's probably worthwhile. Because over a long period of time, I think Bitcoin's shown that it increases in value because there's a fixed supply, increasing demand. What happens to price? It's pretty obvious. But short term, it goes up and down because there are people that are trading it, there are people that thrive on the volatility. So, are we in a bubble? Probably, most likely. I don't know. But I don't worry too much about that because that's more an economics question than a technical one. And I'm a technical guy.
15 years from now, how do you think that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency will be integrated into the future? Do you think that they'll still be around? Do you think that people will be using it more frequently? What's your opinion about the state of crypto in the next 15 years?
That's a really good question, and I wish I knew the answer, but I can't in good conscience be able to predict the future that well. I will say that I think the price will go up because there's a constant demand, or there's an increasing demand and a constant supply. But I suspect that Bitcoin in particular and just society in general will see a lot more liquidity of assets. Just anything in general. Like if you can trade something really quickly for money, that will sort of give people a lot more freedom and flexibility. So I see sort of society heading in a more freedom-ish direction, partly enabled by Bitcoin. And that's a good thing. I want people to have more freedom. I want people to be able to innovate more. I want people to build civilization instead of sort of rent-seeking behavior that we see everywhere. It's kind of sad to me that rent-seeking is sort of like the dream that people have. I want to have a job at a corporation and do nothing, and draw a paycheck or draw a big paycheck doing nothing. That doesn't add anything. I want people to want to add something, and I see that in Bitcoin. I don't really see that in other parts, especially like government or a big business or something like that. You have tons of rent-seeking behavior there. And this is part of what makes me so excited about Bitcoin and why I wear the cowboy hat. It's, it is sort of the Wild West, and there's a lot of room for innovation, a lot of room for new businesses and entrepreneurs to get in and provide value and build civilization and think long-term and make everything better. And that's why I'm as passionate about Bitcoin as I am.
So thank you so much. This was an amazing interview. Could you maybe tell our audience where they can find you, what to look forward to in your future?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Jimmy Song. So I tweet every once in a while. I also am on Medium at Jimmy Song. I write a bunch of articles. I'm on YouTube. My show is called Off Chain, and I try to put out videos fairly frequently. I also have GitHub at Jimmy Song. Well, I guess Jimmy Song's my username there, and I have a bunch of code there if you want to take a look. And I'm working on a book, Programming Bitcoin. It's for O'Reilly, and that should be released later this year. So, yeah, those are all things you can look forward to.
Amazing. Well, again, thank you so much, and so looking forward to what's to come.
Okay.